James Blundell, and welcome to my fortnightly podcast, Down on the Farm. Click on the red button to subscribe. Over 40 plus years, his creative genius, lyrically, musically, has been expressed in a body of work that's delighted millions of fans worldwide. He stands shoulder to shoulder with Paul McCartney and David Bowie in the pantheon of popular song. Ed O'Brien from Radiohead described him as the most prolific writer of great songs in popular music. From the bell ringers of Split Ends, I've Got You, History Never Repeats, Message to My Girl, through to the Crowded House anthems of Fall at Your Feet, Don't Dream It's Over, Take the Weather With You, right to the pandemic psychedelia of To My Island from the brilliant new album Dreamers Are Waiting. His music is characterized by its intimate empathy and authenticity. You don't just hear his songs, you feel them in your body and in your bones. Of course, I'm speaking about Neil Finn, a very special guest for this episode of Down on the Farm. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you very much. That's very kind words. Thank you.
It's amazing. I work very closely with a fellow called Terry MacArthur who does the research, and he pens beautifully. We've written a lot of songs together. But we were just saying the first time I remember being literally struck dumb by a vivid image was one of the first Split Ends clips, and I was in my final year at school in 1981. And I can't even remember whether it was Countdown or, because MTV, I don't think it started at that stage of the game, but it was just so visionary. With everything you've done and with the dormancy of the last couple of years, Dreamers are no longer in waiting. You're on tour again and you're in Australia. How have you prepared for going back on the road? I mean, it's a quantum leap from being at home to being back at it.
Yeah, well, it's been made all the more special by having to wait a long time. We named our album Dreamers Are Waiting at a time when I suppose there was already quite a sense of that in the world, but I probably couldn't have imagined it would take quite as long as it did. So it seems even more appropriate now. And, you know, the little cave that Nick did as a painting on the cover of that, there is, you know, kind of a good representation of what it's been like is, you know, sitting in your little cave with the rabbit on the windowsill, looking out the window and not seeing much of life, you know. But I think great things have been happening in people's rooms, and we're now able to gather together in one room as a band, as we did before we made Dreamers Are Waiting, and pursue music until 5 or 6 people are making a really good sound together. You know, it's an unusual thing in the world, I think, and for us now, and we're completely relishing it because it seems so unusual. And I don't know whether that style of bringing songs to the surface is that prevalent anymore, given the amount of people working in their individual spaces and sending files to each other and layering things and that. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but man, we feel it's pretty special.
Well, the other thing too, in this incarnation, it's pretty much the original band with the mega added bonus of having your boys with you. I'm blessed to play with mine, and it's just such a different experience. How does that work for you with half the original band and your 2 children? It's brilliant.
Well, I mean, there's no 5 people on earth that are closer to the Crowded House ethos and you know, song catalogue and humour, and with more familial kind of instincts than the people in this lineup now. So in a way, it feels like a return as much as it is a new phase. You know, those guys grew up with it, but they've gone off and had amazing experience writing and creating their own music and becoming amazing musicians. So they bring with them a lot of fresh angles on it. But yeah, no, everyone's got the big abiding respect for the way that Crowded House should operate and this quality that we should be able to bring out.
Given that the legacy of both bands and your own work, but particularly Crowded House, because it's as well known as any musical name globally, how do you, in the creative process, avoid or work around leaning back on a process that's worked so successfully in the past? Because I know that your innovation is such a big part of your psyche and thought process. Is there a different way that you approach the new album after Hiatus?
Yeah, I think already the stuff we're recording in the last few days seems to have some really fresh angles on it. there's style and kinds of music that we haven't approached before. And I do think it's always been quite important, that feeling that with every album you should broaden the palette, keep it fresh somehow. And it's hard to do because you get attracted to the way that certain chords ring together and certain melodies become your signature thing. And, you kind of want to embrace that because that is you, it's your personality, but you also don't want to feel like you're trying to write, the second version of some well-known song. It just doesn't seem like much of a good challenge anyway, and ultimately self-defeating, I think. So, the new angles that you find sometimes are not as easy for people to embrace as the old things, but I think people that listen I'm lucky that there's a lot of people who are those kind of listeners, will find great depth and enjoyment out of stuff that's, maybe it's not built for what, I don't even know what is built for pop radio now. Anyway, I doubt that half the songs we put out back in the day would make it onto the pop radio now. So it's, it's best not to think about all that really, and just put music out that feels like it's got some heart. And it, when I'm sitting in my room and I'm writing something, I know I'm onto something when it makes me feel a certain way, and then you go, well, if I feel that certain way hearing that melody, probably a good chance other people will as well. Empathy, you're building an empathy.
Perfectly put. I could not agree with more. The searching personal question I have as a writer, I look at your melodies, I can never imagine you sitting down and mathematically arriving at a melody. They're just so individual. My suspicion, and this is what I want clarified, is do you actually compile a piece in your head with the melody and then figure out how to play it? Or do you have a more academic approach to the music part adjacent to the lyric? Or
it's not academic, that's for sure. It's pretty similar. Most times it's pretty similar. I do have the odd time where I'll just sit down the piano and something will pop out and it has the words and music and chords attached. It's not often that it all happens in the old-fashioned way like that. Normally what happens nowadays is I'll sit down and I'll find something that's really interesting to my ears, like a little chordal thing or an atmosphere, and or I'll get a machine going and I'll find a little loop or something that'll get me going, and then I'll sing along with that for a little while. I'm taping everything all the time, and then find the part of that suddenly seems interesting, and then I maybe make a new loop of that and then play along with that for a while. So I assemble these series of little demos, and then I get to a point where, okay, there's actually a really solid idea there now. And so I write the song, like it's just, I'm waiting for something that's got the feeling of what the record might sound like actually to get the process beginning, which is,
I'd take a master's class from that, because the hardest thing is getting the songs cohesive in a body where you're going, well, which part fits with what? Do you have the little black book of ideas that you started 20 years ago and you go, actually, you know what? I'm going to have another look at that. And it sort of makes a lot more sense now.
Things have come out from old ideas. Yeah. It'll pop into your head and you're looking for a middle eight or a way to get from a verse to chorus or something. And and I've got a really massive library of bits and pieces in my computer that I every now and again scan through a little bit just to see if there's something to start me off,
Refresh your course.
Matter of getting started every day. You just sit there and you stare into space for a while and you don't feel like you've got a musical bone in your body, and then one little thing pops out and suddenly go, oh yeah, okay, that's, I can play that for 10 minutes or so, and then sparks another idea, and all of a sudden change one bit of phrasing and suddenly you got a song.
I stand by for a social hand grenade, because I know there's a wonderful book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and that's very much your tenet. It's very strong, but quite unspoken. What's your take on the fact that yourself, Midnight Oil, Barnes, Missy Higgins have all had to rearrange their Western Australian tour dates for COVID? Halfway through summer, COVID regulations, yet you can still be one of 30,000 people at a footy match.
It's immensely disappointing not to be able to play, and we were going to do Kings Park, and we specifically pushed to get that. I love that venue. I played it with Paul Kelly a few years ago, and we had 3 nights all sold out there, and it would have been a glorious way to start the tour. So yeah, really disappointing, and it does seem, obviously there's a huge anomaly there. I don't know how to explain it. I'm not sure how with the premiers of West Australia's even tried to explain it, but yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Just come to the footy. We'll deal with the arts later.
Just book a gig at the footy. Bring out the truck and the footy match and do the gig there, I guess. And that's the only option.
Just play in the middle of the oval. It's got to work. How can that possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
And back to the boys. I remember the first time that on a car. I should know which one accompanied you first into Australia on tour. But there's from the audience perspective, it's a absolute alchemy, and that's a word that I've read relevant to yourself and I use all the time. But there's something so special about that that you can't really explain to people why it lifts a performance into a space that's just esoteric. It has a charm that professional and academic relationships don't have. Do they treat you as dad on stage, or is it do they go straight into professional musician mode and become just part of the band?
No, we've gone beyond that as a band now. Families are always going to have a few moments here and there with the long, 60-yard stare. Is that what they call it?
Yeah, that's right.
Nothing's said, but a lot is understood, and so every family's got a few complexities to unravel. But I think when we walk into the music, it's a lot of stuff just peels away. I get quite insistent on certain things, and it doesn't. You have to have certain resilience and not see anything personally. And I think bands get quite good at that, hopefully. And a lot of bands break up because of those kind of things where suddenly there's too much ego attached to singing. But everyone's in a really good attitude.
Beautiful.
They put up with my slight
idiosyncrasies,
worried looks.
The old man's bristling. Everybody duck. That's what I usually get.
Yeah.
Another one out of left field. I don't know why I'm surprised by your birth, but rugby tragic, I believe. I didn't know that about you.
What do you mean?
You love rugby union football.
Oh, lovely tragic. Rugby
tragic, not lovely tragic.
I haven't heard that expression, but it makes perfect sense. Now you've got. Yeah. I do. I love watching rugby test matches. I've become less interested in rugby as the years have gone on. Probably as I've become further and further removed from the ever possibility of ever being able to play the game. And I don't follow it as I played it when I was up until I was about 14. I broke 2 bones in 1 year, and I realised I wasn't built for it. So, and then we always watched the rugby, the All Black tests. And my dad was interested. I was into it because my dad was into it for many years. He would watch the county game, the Super 12 or whatever it is, Super 14 now, 15, last count. And I would watch a little bit of that just so I could talk to him about it. But he's not with us anymore, and he lost interest in rugby even towards the last few years. He actually wasn't even watching test matches. So it slightly dampened my enthusiasm too. But it's a great game.
Yeah, our family's 5 generations deep, but it got to where I just couldn't understand the rules. We're getting penalised for everything. We're either the dumbest side in the competition, or there are too many rules.
Probably the latter, I'd say. But it's such a hard game now. I feel like they have to be like warriors.
It's just so fast. I remember the first time I hadn't seen a couple of them, but I'd been overseas for a couple of years and watched a recent match, and the speed of it, 2 40-minute halves, you'd just be dead in the first 15 minutes. Incredible.
The fitness and brutality.
Yeah. I loved Murray Ball's versions of the county games in Footrock Flats. They were just, fantastic. Everybody just comes straight off the farm and starts thugging each other. As a win.
It's been a big part of New Zealand's mythology. It's probably less so now than it was in a way, even though the game is still just as popular. I suspect, and I'll probably get shot for this, but that there may come a time when New Zealand isn't as dominant as it has been for many years, and it'll be a real reckoning.
We can only hope.
It just seems like it almost inevitable in any human endeavour that the ebbs and flows. Because it's created the only downside of that is it created a kind of an unpleasant New Zealand fan every now and again that's just really arrogant and sort of smug. And I know the Aussies hate those New Zealand fans, but I don't like them much either.
Yeah, sure. Understood.
It seems like it gets in the way when people get a bit sort of, you listen to, I don't listen to talk back after the games, but man, if you want to encounter that kind of attitude, then that's where you get it.
100%. 100%. After so many tours and the globe, there's nowhere you haven't played. What do you hope to achieve? That's just such a pathetic way to ask that question. What are you looking forward to unearthing on this tour? Is there a specific sort of outcome you'd like to?
Yeah, well, every tour you do, I think you start off a little bit here. Even though we only did our last tour a year ago, I know that we'll get back into rehearsal and we'll step on stage and we'll be a bit better band than we were last year. I just think that's what happens when you put some miles on the clock, runs on the board. Next time you gather, you're kind of a little ahead again because you've just found out some stuff in the most useful way of all, which is in front of an audience. We are talking a lot about how to achieve power on stage without pushing everything forward quite so much. There's a natural tendency on stage is to sort of think the live energy translates to everything just being, everybody going for it, and it can create some excitement in a visceral way, but actually the music benefits from being slightly held back and everyone listening to each other and hearing the gaps between notes and digging in and to the feels and maybe just pulling things back to a bit closer to the tempo of the record. You can do that. You don't want to sound sleepy. That's the last thing in the world. You want to sound sleepy, but you get more power, I think, from not pushing everything like a teenage band.
I love you. I completely agree more. I think you may have worked with a different guy called James Gillard in Australia. And he, a wonderful bass player with Mondo Rock and Ross Wilson, and you'll sort of click there. But he always says it's what you don't play that makes the difference, and it's a beautiful adage. It works really well.
Well, it's the holes you leave, yeah, and you can only really do that when you're cut back from full tilt. When you're full tilt, not the process of leaving holes.
The other thing that astounds all of us, and I'm as avid a fan as anybody. Not many people are sitting around one day and the phone rings and Mick Fleetwood is going, I've got this idea. So did that come completely out of the blue? Was the Fleetwood Mac something you even saw coming, or was it just a beautiful happenstance?
No, I never thought it was coming, that call. It came right out of the blue. We'd got to know Mick a bit, and he'd been down into New Zealand and actually done some playing with us in the studio, and he's really, really good company. And it was a good friendship had developed with the whole family, actually. But yeah, no, I wasn't expecting that. And he took a long time to get around to actually asking me, although I knew straight away what he was getting at, because he's very, Mick will use many words instead of a few to achieve his aim, and they're beautifully put together. But it took a while. He was, what do you think? Well, we were just thinking, Lindsay's gone. As soon as I could say that, I went, oh, okay, well, why are you calling me? So, and I was about to do a sound check for a gig, and I had to say, look, that's incredible, Mick, but I'm just going to have to call you back tomorrow about that, because it's a really huge, I'd have to think about it. And he knew that was fair enough. And I wasn't, even though I was delighted, amazed to be asked, I just thought I wasn't 100% sure it was a necessarily good idea. It's quite a lot to consider.
Oh, hugely so, and such great legacies, but it was such great. There's a lot on the line with both of them, and I think that the delight for everybody watching that, it worked so well. It was just such a great combination. Did you learn anything about yourself during that process that took you by surprise?
Well, it was really nice to know that I could be a part of something else that's completely out of my normal life, and with focus and attention and and some love and thrown in there. I think do it well enough to make the band really happy and to make the sound really good. And I think it was a good chapter in Fleetwood Mac's history, and it's long, and it's only a small chapter in the overall thing, but I think we did it proud. I feel like we left it in good shape. Everybody was keen to do more. No one's being able to, and who knows whether that will happen now. But everyone said that was a tour that they've enjoyed as much as any tour they ever did. So I'm
And at the end of the day, primary motive for all of you is great music, and that was achieved. So
great songs and great arrangements, and really fun to sing. And I learned about how they put songs together. It's always interesting because you don't take it in as a songwriter until you learn somebody's song. You don't. There's some subtle art involved that you miss because that's what great songs do. They don't reveal their their component parts until you try to learn them.
Deceptively simple. That's right. Then it's not, and you're going, this bloody thing was written on piano. I can tell because I can't find the notes on the guitar.
Yeah, there's always a couple of little things that you are really not natural for you to do, and they're the difficult sticking points, which was a couple of things that Lindsay does that I go, I don't know if I can actually sing like that, but I didn't want to mimic him.
That's right.
I wanted to be true to the, I just wanted to present what I would want if I came to Fleetwood Mac show and somebody was there instead of Lindsay. I go, well, I just want you to sing it really well. Just don't have to sound like Lindsay, but just don't mess with it, or don't put any melismas in there, or that are not called for, or something.
Spot on. The other thing I read about you, which I just love, it's a personal, it's that moment, and it happens with a great band and repetition. That consistency of the moment that you know that you and your audience are actually fully engaged. That's I think the point of it all, and probably the hardest drug in the world ever to give away. Do you find that comes more easily and more readily? I mean, you've been doing this for long enough not to be guessing anymore. Is there a quick way to get to that point with each performance, or is it something that happens of its own alchemy every time?
You can write your set to be pretty sure that the audience is going to, front up. You don't have to, you don't be deliberately obscure, unless, in some occasions, if you're magnificently confident and you go on and start with something that's wholly unexpected, it can really work for you. But, because the audience are almost caught unawares, and they sort of, but, as I'm sure very well, that you can structure your set to bring the audience forward and into the show, and then you give them times where they can settle back and just enjoy the music. You can't expect a crowd to stay up for an hour and a half or 2 hours. They need a little bit of respite. But you can really use that to your advantage and make people dream away and give them that, the big dreamy middle set of the set, but it's just the writing a set list that does the job. But it's a wonderful feeling when the audience are fully. And there's some nights where it's really hard to get them as well. They're going, wow, they're quite a hard audience to read. They just have a different feeling about them. Sometimes that's to do with how hard it was to get in the venue. You got no idea of, what. I sometimes feel that when venues are out of town, like. In
Brisbane, for instance,
way out of town, and people just go there as a destination, and there's nothing around them, that sometimes you walk out and stand, you feel like, oh, this crowd they're not prepared yet. They haven't. I love it when venues are in the middle of a city, because people have been out and about and they're interacting, and they're going, this is normal days. They've been to a bar, they've been to a restaurant, and they're gathering with their friends, and then they're in the moment when they get there. They're already halfway into the show, so you walk out and you just get that instant connection.
No, 100%. I was just about to say thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, and nice talking to you.
Have a fantastic tour, and the album will be yet another screaming success. Go and buy a dairy farm somewhere in New Zealand and enjoy your peace and quiet.
Well, that'd be a weird day. We're on a dairy farm.
Take it easy, mate. Real pleasure.
Mate. Take care. So all the best.
Cheers, Neil.
Bye.
The inimitable Neil Finn. Thank you so much, mate. What a pleasure for all of us. And that's it for this episode of Down on the Farm. Thank you to our very special sponsors, Aussie Legends Hemp, Stylish Outback Clothing, and at the Granite Belt Brewery. Don't forget to subscribe, red button in the corner, on Punctured Media's YouTube channel. And I'll see you for the next episode of Down on the Farm.
Got my education down on the farm. Learned about loving and a country girl's arm.